tonight I'm just going to give you a very brief introduction to meditation and mindfulness. So what I'm going to cover on topic on the mindfulness and meditation, I'm going to begin with talking about why we should meditate, some good reasons why. Then I'm going to move on and talk about some different forms of meditation, and finally I'm going to come to the benefits, what you can hope to experience and gain from bringing a meditation and mindfulness practice into your life. So to begin with, why should we meditate? So there's many reasons why we should meditate, and I'm just going to break it down and try and narrow it down to a few points. And the first thing and the most important thing, I think, is that it's about taking a moment for yourselves. Everyone has busy lives nowadays. The modern world is busy, fast-paced, lots going on all the time. So by bringing a meditation practice into your life, in a sense, it's affirming that you're important, that your mental health's important, the fact that you set aside a certain amount of time. A lot of people say to do it first thing in the morning, last thing in the evening. And if one of those works better for you, then I would say pick one. But if you can do both, that is the optimal. But if you can't, either morning or evening. And it's essentially taking some time for yourself. Normally when you come to meditate, and I'll talk about this not next week, again, a simple meditation guided practice, but essentially you're on your own, you've got your candles lit and maybe some incense and some spiritual inspirational imagery or something, and it's you time. If you're meditating, it's unlikely that your partner or your kids or anyone's going to come in and bother you, because it's either going to be early in the morning or late in the evening. So first and foremost, it's you time, me time. You can just take that time for yourself, sit quietly and allow the thoughts to still or to arise, whichever the case may be. It doesn't really matter, you're just observing. And so it can be very important, just as important as it is to get your exercise in each day, to take a moment to check in with yourself, with your feelings, with your body. And so obviously that's a great reason, and that's why I've said it first. The other thing is to invest in your mental health, because if you're constantly, like you see these high-powered executives who work 10, 15 hours a day, they never have a moment to stop and check in with themselves in order to see these, say, a bit of knee pain or some recurring thought that's going around about something going on in your life. But when you sit down and close your eyes for 5 or 10 minutes of meditation, you can't help but see that thought, whatever issue with the boss or your partner or some work colleague, it will just keep coming around. You'll be thinking about this issue and you'll be like, oh no, I need to come back to my breath. And then you'll be back on your breath, and then it will come back in and it will just keep coming back in, because it's almost a sign that this is an important issue in your life, and you need to do what you need to do to either remedy or fix that issue. Or again, this is more complicated than what I can get into in this talk, but it just shows, it brings issues, whether it's in the body, the emotions or the thoughts, it brings the issues up to the surface. And by bringing it up to the surface, you're able to see it very clearly and to be able to deal with it. And the final thing that I'll talk about, there's talking about the benefits later in the talk. We'll come back to this, but I'll save them to later. And the final thing that I will say, and that's very, I've learned it a lot through all my practice and study. Ultimately, if you're not present during the day, or if you're not present in some activity, or present in whatever you're doing with your children, your partner, your job, while you're walking, whatever it is that you're doing, if you're not present and you're not there, then where are you? And most of the time we can be off in our thoughts. There's a quote about, normally if you're anxious, you're living in the future, and if you're depressed, you're living in the past. And a lot of the time we're either in one of these two spaces. Our mind is either projecting or it's reflecting on what's gone before. But by bringing all your attention into the present moment, all of these things disappear because you're focused on what's now, what is now. None of these stresses and strains and worries exist in the present moment. And so that's why it's important to bring some practice in, which again, going through the month, we'll get into and talk about. And again, any questions, put them in the comments or private message me if you feel more comfortable with that, and we can begin a dialogue. I'm happy to do that. Sometimes it's easier in a dialogue form or in the comments. So I'm very happy to do that with you. So next, I'll move on to different forms of meditation, just briefly touch on a few of them that you might be aware of or you might not. The first one is a walking meditation. So this isn't the typical sitting down, eyes closed. This is where you are out walking, normally in a nice park or forest walk, or wherever's the best place for you to do some walking, and you set the intention. Normally you'll either have trees or lampposts or some boundary that you'll be able to see off in the distance, and you say to yourself, from here until I get to that point, that tree, that lamppost, that stick on the ground, I'm going to be mindful. I'm going to be aware of my feet, touching the floor, of my breath, my arms, and I'm just going to focus intently and be mindful of my body as I'm walking. And this is walking meditation. And of course, most of us are walking about much of the day, from here to there. And it can be a really good thing to bring into your daily life that, oh, I'm going to walk somewhere, so I can practice my walking meditation while I get there. And the biggest issue is to remember. A lot of the time we'll arrive at where we've walked to and gone, oh, I wasn't mindful at all there. And this is something that I'd like to emphasize a lot over the month, is that when that would occur, let's just take that as an example. I'm going to walk to the car. Oh, I can be mindful. And then you walk to the car and you realize, oh, I wasn't mindful at all. I've been, completely absent. That's not a bad thing. That's noticing it is just as important as the mindfulness itself. So that's a very important thing to grasp as well. There's no good or bad. It's just what it is. Was you mindful or wasn't? And it's very simple as that. The next meditation, if you like, is called the Zen tea ceremony, or in Japanese it's Chao no Yu, or the way of tea. And what the Zen masters would do back in the day is they'd have their Chao no Yu, their tea ceremony, and we could all do this in our lives if we wanted to, and they would sit down and they would have like traditional green tea. So it wouldn't be a PG Tips tea bag, it would be the tea leaves, and they'd put them in the water, they'd steep the leaves, the water would steep and the tea would form, and then they would take extra special care in pouring the tea out and extra special care in drinking the tea. And this is called Chao no Yu, and it's the Japanese tea ceremony. And again, just like the walking meditation, it's a tea ceremony. We're going to sit and have a pot of tea, and we're going to be intensely present as we can while we have our tea. And you can imagine the power in two Zen masters coming together for a cup of tea and to talk about some Zen koans. It would be really intense energy, and there's not going to be, their mind wouldn't drift at all. It would be in the tea ceremony. So that's another thing. And then another thing, like just to build on those two, is mindful eating. You're having a meal. I know I'm going to sit and have my meal, and I'm going to try and be mindful. I'm going to try and eat a bit slower. I'm going to try and let the tastes, flow around my mouth and experience the consistency. Is it crunchy? Is it soft? What does it taste like? And again, most of us eat 3 square meals a day, don't we? Breakfast, lunch, dinner, maybe a few snacks in between. So all of these things are opportunities for us to bring that mindful presence into our life. And it's just about setting the intention before I'm going to walk here, I'm going to have my meal, I'm going to have my cup of coffee, and you will find, and I'd love to know your experiences in the comments, because it just enhances it tenfold for me, even 100-fold. If you're often in your mind worrying, to just come back for one moment and say, no, I'm going to have my tea, I'm going to have my lunch, and I'm going to be mindful, I'm going to be in this moment, and reality as it is around me, it can be very powerful. So, and just again, to move on from that, mindful moments while you're driving, while you're having your tea, or you can even, if you really want to get intense, you can set an alarm. Say, I'm going to set an alarm for 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and that alarm will go off and it will say mindful moment, and you just stop whatever it is you're doing, and just, oh yeah, I'm here, I have a body and I'm alive. Okay, and then you can get back to life. It doesn't take long, and it doesn't take anything away from your day. It actually enhances it quite profoundly. And like I've just described, you can do as many or as few as you want, but 1 or 2 per day really helps. And if you begin to get a benefit and positive feedback from it, then you'll try and do it more and more, and you'll notice if you haven't been mindful for a certain period of time. So now I'm going to move on to the more traditional seated meditation. The Zen Buddhists call it Zazen, and the Greeks would have called it ascesis, a spiritual practice. And I'm just going to go through a few of these different practices that you can do while sitting down. 2 of the most common ones is Vipassana meditation. You might have heard about people talking about 7, 14, 28-day Vipassana silent retreats, and these can be very intense. You don't talk, you don't read, you don't watch any telly, and all you do is just a lot of meditation. And ultimately, I think Vipassana is just, like mindfulness. You just watch your breath come in and out, and it can be very profound for people once you get over the initial hurdle. And this is what a lot of beginner practitioners would do, Vipassana meditation. Just you sit, eyes closed, and you just breathe, and you just observe the breath, breaths coming in, breaths going out, breaths coming in, breaths going out. And then all of a sudden you're thinking about the shopping tomorrow, and that will take you for a few seconds or a minute, and then you think, oh, hold on, I was breathing a minute ago. And then you come back and you breathe, and you do a few more breaths, and then it will be, oh, the kid's uniform, and then and then, oh, hold on, come back, and this is Vipassana. Some, again, I suppose it's just another name for the same thing. It's called thought observation, which is what I will share with you next Saturday. I'm going to share a thought observation exercise that's just very simple, and that you can do in the morning and evening, and that is in a sense the same thing, Vipassana, but you focus more on your thoughts. You concentrate, you close your eyes and try and focus on the blackness of your eyelids, and you just watch the thoughts arise. And it's almost like in the Buddhist texts they would say that the mind is like the blue sky, pure clear awareness, and then the thoughts are like the clouds. And so to just describe a session, you'd be there and you begin, and this blue sky, clear awareness, the blackness of your eyelids, and all of a sudden, a cloud, the shopping, or this, or holiday, or whatever it is, or that thing someone said to me yesterday, and the cloud will come across. And sometimes we can jump on the cloud and go off riding, and it can be several minutes before we realize, oh goodness, I've been off with that thought for ages. Let me come back. And like I just said a minute ago, coming back is just as important as, beginning again, they call it in Buddhism. And it doesn't matter if your mind's very scattered or you've got a lot going on. You just try and keep coming back as much as you can, and then the timer will go, and then you objectively assess how your session was, and that's it. There's no good or bad. It's just, it is what it is. Then there's another very helpful one is called japa, or mantra meditation, and there's 2 very famous mantras that you might have known or heard about. One is called the Maha Mantra, and it's the Hare Krishna. The Hare Krishna people, the ISKCON, they chant this mantra to Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama. If you like George Harrison, he has a song, My Sweet Lord, and in the second he starts with Hallelujah in the background, and then he goes on to Hare Krishna. So yeah, maybe it's a beautiful song, one of my favorites. So maybe after this, just YouTube George Harrison, My Sweet Lord, listen to that. And the second half, there's the Hare Krishna mantra in the background, and another famous one is the Buddhist Om Mani Padme Hum. And so japa or mantra meditation would just ultimately, rather than watching the thoughts or the breath, you would just continually chant the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, and it helps to focus the mind much more directly. And yes, you can still be doing your Om Mani Padme Hum, and still be, your mind's drifting and thinking about other things, but it's like an anchor. It really helps you to focus the mind. And moving on from that, with something very similar to the mantra, is you can create your own affirmation. And this is something that I studied with my hypnotherapy and counseling, and it's called affirmation. So if you lack something in your life, or there's something you want to increase in your life, you can just create a mantra. And some very good examples of this is you can just sit with your eyes closed and just repeat a phrase such as I am strong, I am strong, I am strong, I am strong, or I love my life. And you just repeat, I love my life, I love my life, or I'm grateful for my family, I'm grateful for my family, I'm grateful, I can achieve anything. And obviously this is up to the individual. Whatever you need in your life, you can just affirm that you have it, and you'll find by regular dedicated practice, it will start to blossom and start to come more in your life. And the final one would be religious meditation, which is not really meditation at all, but you could term it in with this group. Religious meditation is ultimately praying, prayer. Christian or the Jew or the Muslim, when they do their meditation, it takes the form of praying. And the Muslims have a very, structured prayer system where they do their oblations and their mantras, their Arabic mantras. I think the Jews have something very similar, and often the Christians, maybe they'd say from Matthew, our Father that art in heaven, the Lord's Prayer, or they might have some other form of prayer that they do, or oftentimes, before sleep or upon waking, you just offer thanks up, thanks for today, thanks for my food, thanks to my family, thanks for all these things. You just offer up some thanks to your version of God if you're a religious person. So there are many different forms of meditation that you can take. Again, anything that interests you, comment or DM me, and I'm happy to point you in the right direction to more resources, because I've sampled and tried them all, and depending on where you are in your life, certain ones will help, and certain ones they weren't in. Oh, I'm not interested in that stuff. Oh, what's that? But there's so many that you shouldn't worry about leaving that one behind. You should focus on what one's calling out to you, what one's gonna be easy for you to practice. And to conclude, I'm going to just share some of the benefits of bringing or any of these practices into your daily life. Some of the benefits that you can expect to start seeing very quickly, within a week or two, or even 2 or 3 days of intense practice. So the first one would be that the mind will begin to calm down, and you'll be able to see the thoughts racing around, and you'll be able to create some separation from them. And this was the most profound thing, I suppose, that I've learned or experienced when I first started sitting for meditation, is that you'll be sitting there and you're doing your vipassana or thought observation, you're trying to watch the thoughts, and all of a sudden some completely random thought from 2 months ago Wednesday will just pop in, and you'll think, oh, where did that thought come from? Where did that come from? Because it's not me. I didn't think that thought. It just popped in. And so you can use this and try and create a separation from your thoughts, especially recurring negative thoughts about your own person or some other person. You can start seeing your thoughts like as something separate to you, and they would say in Buddhism to not identify with the thoughts, not be taken by the thoughts. And this is a very helpful thing if you have regular recurring thoughts, or just some random thought comes and it starts recurring, for no reason. You can start to calm the mind down and for it to be quite still, and you can experience moments of quite profound stillness very early on. Even 1 or 2 or 3 seconds of no thoughts, it's a big deal, and it really helps the mind. The next one is just relaxation and getting to know your inner world a bit more. Like I said a few times, and I recommend, I have a room. I'm lucky enough to have a room where I keep my books and my meditation, and that's all I do in that room. It's for my books and my meditation. Maybe you might have to set up somewhere in the bedroom or the front room or whatever helps for you, but by turning the lights off, having a few candles and maybe some incense at the end of the day maybe, or in the morning, whenever's best for you, it can start relaxing you, and you start getting to know your inner world. If we're constantly rushing around at 100 miles an hour all the time, we never get a moment to get to understand ourselves and what's going on inside, how we feel, emotionally or physically in our body. Maybe that shoulder that's been bothering you for ages and you've been overlooking, when you sit down, it starts throbbing, and it's really telling you, I need to be attended to. So to relax and get to know your inner world, you can begin to build some skills to manage your stress and anxiety, again by calming the mind or seeing the thoughts for what they are, rather than running away or jumping onto one of those clouds, those anxious clouds of worry. You can say, oh no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that this time. I know what I did yesterday with my worry about this, and it wasn't helpful. It just made me anxious and stressed me out. Today, I'm going to try not to go with that. And again, it's just an amazing practice, because if you just think about it very logically, would you rather go off with a stressful, anxious thought, or would you try and be mindful and avoid that process? It's very clear, isn't it? Very clear what the better course of action would be. And so there's a few more things. Focus on the present moment, like I said at the beginning of the talk. If you're not here in the present moment, then where are you? If you're worrying about the future, or stressed out about something that happened yesterday, then you're not here experiencing life fully, all around you. And that's probably, for me, one of the biggest thing that it's brought to me. A lot of the time for me, the screen can, the phone screen can really take your attention away, and I'm working, trying hard to leave that out the room or put that somewhere else so I can be present. But again, we've all got our things to work on, haven't we? And finally, how you begin to react, and how you begin to react to and in the world will begin to change, because your mind will become calmer. You'll be less reactionary. Someone might say something to you where in the past you would have just snapped at them, and just reacted. Now there'll be a bit of separation, and so they'll say the thing and you'll think, oh, I remember, I don't have to react to this. And so you can just give them a smile and say, oh, okay, and then carry on. And often that is much worse for the individual, the negative person, to just smile at them and say, oh, thanks. It hurts them more than you, retaliating in kind with backbiting, back and forth, being rude. And so it just helps you to really interact with the world in a much more positive way. And yeah, I think that's my introduction to meditation and mindfulness. As I've